All right, welcome to our recording, and we're going to start with brushes. So let's go ahead and share. All right, as far as creating brushes, there's just a couple things that you really need to keep in mind. I'm going to make two brushes. I'm going to make a painterly style brush from a scan that I have, and then I'm going to pull an image from the web and I'll make more of a stamp brush. So let's close this thing out. I don't need this. So let's start with the painterly brush. Scan piece of paper and it's just blobs of paint. Like I said before, when we talked about collage, um, I probably don't have this piece of paper still, but definitely want to scan it because these things can be pretty handy. Something like this, if you've got Procreate or even like a really good pack of Photoshop brushes, that's exactly how they create these things. This would be a great watercolor brush. So I'm going to use this little chunk right here, or maybe the splatter over here. Next, I will make a stamp brush. And for that, I'm just going to jump online. And it's getting close to the Halloween. I was going to do a coffee stain brush. I like those a lot too. I've actually got a pack, so yeah. So let's do a skull. These are great because anytime that you need a nice, I don't know, Halloween pattern or something like that, these can be pretty handy. Yeah, that'll work. Copy image. Go to Control N. If you copy something from the web, it's going to remember uh, in the clipboard the size. So if you just hit Control N after you copy something, take a look. Your very most recent one, this will be the size of whatever you copied. So this one's 1,000 by 1,000. Choose Create, and then Control V. All right, so I'm going to make this brush, and I'll make this brush. All right, first thing to consider, one is size. This is a raster-based program, meaning it's comprised of pixels, meaning that it's not infinitely scalable. Why that's important to our brush creation is if you make a brush that's, say, 10 pixels by 10 pixels, that's cool. It's only going to be 10 pixels by 10 pixels. Could you scale it up beyond that? Yes. What would happen if you scale anything else beyond that? It's going to fall apart. It's going to be, your brush will be pixelated. It will be smoky edges. It will be foggy. It would be just like this if I made this thing, image size. You know what? Let's add 4 times as many pixels to it. And now let's see what it looks like at 100%. That doesn't look great to me. I don't like that. It's too, too blurry. So Control Z. So if you think that you're going to need your brush big, then you need to start with a big composition. If you think that, hey, I'm never going to use this thing for anything bigger than like an 8.5 by 11, okay, that's cool. But if you're working on I don't know, big campaign that might need a billboard or something, you better build a big brush. So the way that we do this is we start with a new document. I'm going to go to File, New. This document is going to basically dictate the size of your brush. So I use inches because most of the stuff that I do, I print. You can always make your brush smaller. That's not a big deal. So I'm going to do inches. And if I'm doing inches, it's always going to be 300 resolution. I'm assuming if it's inches, it's going to be print. Now, how big does this brush need to be? 13 inches by 13 inches? That's a whopper. You might think, well, you just said big is better. It's to an extent. These brushes, they clog up your system. They're going to stay in Photoshop, and every time Photoshop does something, it's got to think about that brush. And every time you use that brush, it's got to think about that brush. And every time you scale it up and scale it down, it's got to refigure out that brush. So don't just make it big to make it big. Be logical. I usually will make my brushes about 1 inch by 1 inch or 2 inches by 2 inches. I found that that's like the sweet spot for me because most of what I print is no bigger than 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17 tops. Have I done bigger stuff? Sure. And when I do those things, if I make a brush, I'll make them bigger. But for this demo, I'm just going to do 1 inch by 1 inch to kind of move it along. All right, 1 inch by 1 inch, 300 DPI. So if I was to print this brush, it'd be about that big. Create. Now I'm going to pull both of these items into this file. So up first is this. Now this is important. Actually, I'll do it wrong and I'll show you what I did wrong. So I'm just going to Control A, Control C, close it out, Control V, size it down some. It's a bit big, which is good. So there's my first brush. Second one, I'll just do a lasso, my selection tool. That was L for lasso. I don't know if you caught that, but we've talked about these selection tools before. Lassos would be perfect for this. Just grab this little chunk, Control C, Control Tab, Control V, Control T. Bada bing. All right, ready to make some brushes now. I'm going to leave this open in case I want to go back to this. Let's start with the skull. Zoom in a little bit. All right, the two most important things when it comes to brush creation. One is size. We just covered that. Two, your brush will not actually, I'm gonna back this up for a second. I want to make a mistake so you can see it. Let me find a different skull. Okay, I like this skull better. So I'm going to use this one. All right, I'm going to define this. I will do this 3 times. For every brush that you want to create, you need to go through this procedure. It's edit, define brush preset. This is how you make a Photoshop brush. Simple as that. Now, it's smart to name it. So sample brush 797, what does that mean? I'll do red skull. Makes sense? And choose OK. Now, by default, if you've got the brush out, it's going to load your brush right away. All right, let's make a new comp. File, new. Our digital paintings, 11 by 17. Sounds like a good starting spot. 11 by 17, create. All right. Now, you would think that I just made a brush, right? So when I paint, that's what you're going to see. Well, zoom in a little bit. And I'll paint once. A new layer. There's my brush. Not quite maybe what you expected, right? Here's the original brush. Or here's what I sampled. And here's what created. Anybody explain to me, as if I can't see, what just happened? What's the problem here? Here's what I sampled. Here's what painted. What's the problem? Or what didn't I get?
Is the mode is divide? Yes.
Oh, actually it is. Good call. Let's turn it to normal. Good call. Let's do Control A, delete. B for brush. Good call. I'm on normal. I'll hit it again. Same thing. So just tell me what's different. You can see this, and you can see this. What am I not getting? Before, after. If you can see my screen, hopefully it's pretty obvious. What's different about this image than this image? What? Yes. there is a certain amount of like see-throughiness. Yeah, it's like a low opacity. But hopefully you guys are seeing the color. Like, where's the blues? Where's the bright reds? Where's the whites? Where's the blacks? I don't see any of that stuff. And yeah, it is kind of like a low opacity.
Yeah.
Here's what's important to remember. Whatever you sample, whatever you define as a preset, you're not going to get those colors. You'll never get those colors. The only thing that's going to ever give you colors with a brush is the color that you pick. And that's it. So there's a blue skull, and here's a green skull.
Oh, God.
Now, maybe that's cool. Maybe you like it like that, but it's very unpredictable when you're doing it this way. So what I would encourage you to do is when you're defining your own brushes, just think in grayscale, right? The reason that this thing is semi-transparent, it's kind of see-through, like you can even see the overlapping colors, which again, that's kind of a coolish, happy accident. Not what I want, but black, something that's black is going to be 100% opaque on your brush. Something that's white is 100% transparent. Let's turn this layer off, turn a new layer on. All right, let's try that again. Here's an image that is grayscale. Okay, well, that's cool. Let's try this. Edit, define brush preset, call this skull. All right, let's jump over to my new comp and I'll paint. All right, well, a little bit more predictable, right? Let's Control Z that. Let's paint with black. Cool. All right, well, we've got a nice skull brush. There's a problem though. Can anybody catch it? There's something kind of tagged along that I didn't really want here. I want the skull.
Watermarks?
Yeah, it's got this vector EPS 10, Adobe stock, blah, blah, blah. Guys, whatever is on this is going to get captured. So if you've got areas that you don't want, you're going to need to either mask that stuff out or just paint it out. So just come over here, B for brush. I don't want this brush. Just take a square brush, DX, and I'm just going to get some white, paint that out, paint that out. Now, a good habit to get into is it's possible that this area back here, and I'm actually going to do it with this one because I can see, you'll see it here in a second. But if you're not totally sure that white is pure white, that will show up on your brush. If it's got 5% gray, you just can't even see it. You might see those edges, which kind of brings me back to this brush. I do not like, let's go B for brush, F5. Where did they go? Finding these oh, here we go. I don't care for, unless it's a frame or a square brush, I don't think that, especially texture brushes, if they've got squared off edges, I find them useless, absolutely worthless. I've got quite a few brushes like foliage and, oh, just odd stuff. And whoever made them wasn't thinking that way. And they've got squared edges. Like, they're not useful. Like, they look fake. Like, you'll see the edge of the brush. Now, this one might work as a stamp or something. You might say, well, it's kind of like a cool Halloween stamp. All right, cool, I get that. But if I'm just trying to make a textured brush, that is not helping me at all. All right, so let's go back to this. I painted out the watermarks. In order to make sure white is really white and black is really black, Control L is in Control Lima. That's going to bring up your levels. So on that layer, Control L. Here's your levels histogram. But talked a little bit about histograms. Now's a good time to get into it. What this is it's a representation of where the value is in this particular image. So it will look like a mountain, peaks and valleys. And depending on the image, if it's dark, you'll have a lot more stuff on the left-hand side. And if it's light, you'll have a lot more on the right-hand side. And if it's a lot of gray, it'll be in the middle. Right now, I can see that there's a lot of information in the white because the background is essentially all white. I mean, there's not a lot of dark in this. if I want to push these to say, all right, I need white to really, really be white, I'm going to grab this slider and just scooch over to the left some. And now white is definitely white. There's very gray, any remnant gray in the background is gone. I could do the same thing with black. I could scooch black over until it gets much more dense. And what this will do is it'll make for a more opaque brush. So if black is pure black, it should paint 100% opaque. All right, well, this looks okay. I'll choose okay. Edit, define brush preset. Call this skull 2. Go back and paint with it. See what that looks like. That's a much better brush, in my opinion. Maybe let's see what it looks like as a red skull. Now we can see, like, yeah, you can see that that red covered up that black entirely, which lets me know that this black is 100% opaque. There's no transparency here. Now, if you wanted transparency, at that point, I think I would just make the brush transparent, but much better. All right, let's talk about a textured brush. Now, if you're doing stamps, these are great. Lots of fun, boom, boom, boom. And we'll play around with some presets here or some dynamics to, mix them up a bit. But these are the ones that I find the absolute most useful. We are still recording, right?
Yes.
Okay. I saw it pop for a second. I want to make sure I didn't lose it. Okay. I love these type of brushes, and I'm gonna do this on purpose to mess it up because I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a blob of India ink, but that selection, whatever I scanned in that piece of paper, it wasn't bleach white. Over here on the left, that's bleach white. And this right here is a little bit gray. That's going to affect my brush. Check it out. Edit. Find brush preset. Sample's fine. I can name it. I'm not going to save it. So let's go over here and let's paint. All right. Not what I want. Like, I want that little piece for sure, but I don't want that little haziness from the original piece of paper. Now, if you want it, great, but do me a favor, email me and tell me in what possible scenario you would want that smoky, weird selection around there, because I haven't thought of one yet. So what I need to do is hit this with levels. So again, layer selected, Control L. All right, so check out this histogram. There is no black. There is no real black in this. There's some dark areas, like right here is about the darkest, but that's not really black. That's just a darkish gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my black slider and I'm going to scooch this over until I touch some of the information here. So I'm just going to click, hold, and drag. And right about there, about 51, you can see that that little node is touching right where the valley or the peak starts to begin. That means that I've introduced something to be data. That's a bad way of saying it. That means my darks have gotten darker to the point where I've introduced some true black. This little pocket right here now is going to be 100% opaque when I paint with it because that is true black. There's not a lot of true black, but there's a little bit. More importantly would be the whites. I'm going to grab this white slider. I'm going to start scooching it to the left. Keep your eyes on that background, that haziness, and watch it go away. Just like that, I think I've got a pretty good brush. Okay. Edit, define brush preset. Okay. Now let's paint with it. That's a good brush. That's a brush I can work with. This is a cool brush for, say, masking or just painting. I can do a lot with this brush. Now, what if I wanted to maybe think about pulling an image in here? Let me think for a second. Now I kind of wish I would scan that thing in. Let's see if I got an image that I can work with real quick to show you how I might be able to apply this. What do I got? Well, give me 1 second. Collage. I got a folder of collages here. All right. Here was a painting I did a long time ago, and this is literally the exact same thing I just did. This splattery thing, this reflection, this fiery reflection, just built a brush and just had fun with it. So make a new layer. Let's get a orange, B for brush. Let's have at it. All right. So we're gonna paint that out. Now here's the thing. If I keep doing this, it's going to be pretty obvious that I'm using the same brush over and over again. So next thing I want to do is I want to add some dynamics to this. And one of the easiest dynamics, and I'm not going to talk about all of these. I'm going to let you guys explore some of these. And some of these, I'll be honest, I've never used because there's a lot. Go to your brush engine. Over on the left-hand side, you've got dynamics, scattering, texture, dual, color dynamics, transfer, brush pose, noise, wet edges, build up, smoothing, protect texture. We talked about this dialog box on Thursday. This is a good one. This is a good place to start. But dynamics, scattering, color dynamics, wet edges, those are some of the ones I really like playing around with. And depending on what brushes you use, you might notice that by default, some of these checkboxes are enabled. That's what's giving your brush the ability to, say, rotate with your stylus pen, or scatter, or move all over the place. It's just these. It's a designer that's gone through and kind of like tricked this thing out. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to space this out. And now I'm going to go to brush dynamics. I'm going to click on it. And it's going to bring me to a sub dialog box. So this is the shape dynamics. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do angle jitter. So instead of it just looking like a stamp over and over and over and over again in the same spot, if I twirl this, take a look down here at the bottom. This is just like a real-time update of what's going to happen. Every time I click, it will kind of spin it around. So it doesn't look so stock every single time. I can do a size jitter. So it will start thin, go thicker, and then end thin again. Unless I want to do pen pressure. Pen pressure will only work if you're using a stylus. If you don't have a stylus, that will be ghosted out. You can do a fade, which will kind of like trail off. It's a nice way of doing like smeary little things, like if you're doing jellyfish tentacles or something like that, where it needs to start thick and kind of end thin. That's pretty cool. I'll keep it to off for right now. So it just kind of like jitters the size, so it's not so stock. All right, let's paint with this now. Just those two dynamics. Take a look at what happened. As opposed to this line that's straight in a row. So you can really add a lot of, I don't know, diversity, personality. None of those are quite the right word I'm looking for. A lot of variables, a lot of difference to each individual stroke with something like that. So that's your shape dynamics. And in my opinion, that is the most important one. Now, 10 other designers would disagree. That's fine. But I find that a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, shape dynamics. Scattering, well, like the name implies, click on it. Now you can scatter. This will just kind of jitter it off of its baseline, up and down. We can add to the count, so add more of them. So if I really need to kind of lay it in thick, right? This is a pretty cool way. Let's get a different color this time. And let's see what this looks like. I'll just click, hold, and drag. Voila. Lots of color, very, very quick. It's the same brush, but they're spinning, they're different sizes, and they're scattered all over the place. I mean, a digital artist would be able to look at it and be like, you're using the same brush. But the layman would look at it and be like, oh, that's cool. How'd you do that? You know what I mean? And then just go in there and say, all right, well, maybe I'll hit it with a little bit different color, with a lower opacity, kind of spin that. So you can really start to build up a kind of a pretty looking color palette just by virtue of, hitting these different types of brush dynamics. What else do we got? F5. So that's scattering, shape dynamics. Texture will add a texture by default into your brush. I want you to play around with all of these. but I'm not gonna go through every single one. We just don't have time for that. Dual brush, we'll pick a separate brush and put two brushes together. The two that I think are worth mentioning here would be color dynamics. What color dynamics will do is it will jitter foreground and background color. So I will jitter quite a bit. And let's do blue. And let's do red. All right, so let's paint with this, see what this looks like. Let's bring it up to 100% opacity. It's like kind of mixing the brush for you. And if you've ever messed around with the mixer brush, that's what that is. So it's grabbing some blue, it's grabbing some red, depending on the jitter amount that you set, and then it's kind of going in between them. So what's in between blue and red, that's where your purples are coming. So that is color dynamics. Up last would be, I'm going to turn all this stuff off. And let's do wet edges. If you like watercolor and you like the way that, you put a stroke down and the way that the color will kind of pull to the edge, like the water like peels apart, and that's where the pigment sets. I guess that doesn't really look that great. Go F5. Let's see if we can set that up a little bit better. Well, I think it's the brush that I built. It's not great for this, but trust me when I say that there are a lot of Photoshop brushes that have wet edges built in, and you will notice more hue and more opacity built up around the outside. Unfortunately, mine's not doing it because I guess I just didn't really set it up right. But there are quite a few that will have that look. Double check, hit F5, take a look at your brushes. Almost 9 times out of 10, wet edge is going to be applied. So that's your brush engine in a nutshell. Have fun with it. Start creating your own brushes. Play around with it. Once you're ready to, say, save your brushes, there's a couple things you can do. Let's hit F5, brushes. If you are just wanting to save a brush, like maybe I like the skull brush, you certainly could save it. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But if it's just like a single brush, what I would recommend is going to tool presets, window, tool presets, and just hitting the plus icon. Tool presets are presets for different tools. I use them for brushes. So if I hit this right now, it's going to say, hey, what do you want to call it? I'll call it the skull brush. And it's got this cool little feature, like, did you want to include the color? This will override whatever foreground color you got picked. Like if you know, like I've got an inker over here. I'll show you what my inker looks like. I know my inker is going to be black. So even if I've got red selected or white selected, if I go to my inker, boom, black selected. So I'm not going to hit OK because I don't want to save this thing, but use tool presets just for like 1 or 2 brushes. Anything else, I'll show you how to export these out. Cancel that. So here's my inker. Boom. Let's take a look at what my inker is. It's just a kind of a thicker brush that's got a little bit of grit to it. What's my other inker look like? It's much more broad, thick, flat. It's like kind of a calligraphy inker where it's got thick parts and thin parts. So I've got a lot of brush presets. Here's one of a splatter. Splatter brush. Right? So tool presets can be a really handy way of just kind of expediting the process. But if you did want to save out your brushes, you go to your brushes, and what you're going to do is we need to select a few. So let's get my skull. I'll hold down the shift key, get that little splatter thing I made, this and the stamp. Those 4 are selected. Hit the little sandwich icon. For some reason, it's not letting me export. So what happened there? Now, I don't know why I was ghosted out the first time. All right, so they're all selected. You'll just export selected brushes. Brushes are defined by a .abr. I think it stands for Adobe Brush. So anytime you see an ABR, the only type of program that can open that is Photoshop. So name it, call it whatever you want to, tell it where to go, and choose save. Once you do that, you have successfully exported your brushes. Now, I'm going to trash these. What if I want to import some brushes, right? I go to Brush Easy, I find some fire brushes, I find some fractal, I find some skyline. Yeah, I want some skyline. So let's do that. Go up to your sandwich icon. This is under brushes, by the way. Import brushes. You've downloaded them. Where are they? So what did I say? Skyline. This is a good set. I linked to this artist's portfolio. I believe she pronounces her name Loish. She's got some free brushes out there on Behance. They're really good for character rendering. They're really good. But palette knife, that's a nice set, painterly set. But I said Skyline, so where are you, Skyline? SK Skyline. Load. Here it is. Nice thing about a Skyline is they give you some birds. But what good's a bird without a skyline? There you go. These things can really save you a lot of time and headache. So finding brushes, creating brushes, sharing brushes. I mean, you create a really rad brush set, you can probably make some money. I just paid $50 for a, here, I'll show you. Rusty Nib, or no, that's the name of the brush pack. I forget the name of the company. Let's see. I just paid like quite a bit of money for these. This is a Rusty Nib. I've been using this to ink with. Really like it. It's pretty reactive. But check this out. See if I can find it. Yeah. Give me 1 second. I know where it's at. Desktop. Oh, it's not there. One more spot. Fits between us. Sweet. I just bought this brush pack that I've been using. I'm coming up with a bunch of like fake action figures. And this brush pack emulates old halftone textures. And it comes with a style guide. So if you want to do, say, old green or something, here's my CMYK values. I'm going to mess this up because I don't remember exactly what brush I was using, but I'll go B for brush, F5. They are in the craft tone set. Yeah. So let's do cyan 50%. Let's hit the cyan here. So that's cyan 50%. And then if I hit it with another percent, let's do 5. If I'm going to try to make green, I think I got to mix it with yellow. So I will do yellow, 50% maybe. And the way that those two react to one another, you'll get all types of different color interactions. So if you're trying to like go for an old print, like, and I know one thing that happened is 50% was much too hot. So F5, let's do, instead of 50, let's do something much, much smaller. We'll do a 20%. Control Z, F5. What it is, it's under scale. I don't want to get too far into this, but the important thing is your scales match. So if I'm at 30%, there's 30%, then I need to make sure that whatever color I'm going to hit it with next F5, brushes, let's do magenta this time. We'll do 70% magenta and make sure that that scale is also 30%. As long as the scales match up, you should be in good shape. But now I'm starting to get more of a purple with the text, with the magenta mixed with the cyan. So if you're into retro offset printing, these are really, really cool brushes. Don't ask me how they created them because I don't know. That's why I had to pay money for them. But that stuff is out there. All right. So we've gone through brushes, how to define them, load them, save them, use them. I'd like to move on to the flat portion of the demo, but does anybody have any questions right now or need anything before we get into that? We're at like 8:15, probably got about another 15, 20 minutes left in me. Does anybody need to see anything or want me to talk about anything? I'm glad that you guys are able to see your grades. That's awesome. That makes me real happy. Everyone's good. Has anyone started their digital painting yet? Does anybody want to share what that looks like? Like, got any ideas yet? It's okay if you haven't, but at a minimum, you should have an artboard created and have an idea of what you're going to do. And don't wait. Go ahead and start throwing some paint on the canvas. Do it on a separate layer. That way, if you don't like it, just turn the layer off. A lot of good painters like Loish, Dave Raposa, like just really good concept painters, they'll paint on one single layer. And I will not ding you in this class if you just have one layer. I don't think it's a good idea. But the technical component of this rubric will not look like the collage. Because, sometimes it needs to be on one layer. That's just that. All right. Let's talk about how to paint flats. I'm working on a logo for my boss right now. It's pretty close to being done, but I don't know what the outcome is, if it's going to be for t-shirts or a banner, but if he wants a poster, I'd like him to have a color treatment as well. So if you're planning on doing flats, he's a big CrossFit guy. Let's get some better brushes here. F5 will B for brush. I lost my layers here. If your workspace ever gets wonky and you lose something and you want it back, just go to Window, Workspace, and I'm going to go to Reset Essentials. Better. All right. The way that I work, especially with things like this, is I will start traditionally with a sketch. I get that approved because I don't want to move on any further. I don't want to waste any time with brushes or typography or color if they don't like the idea. So I always get very fast thumbnails, like 10 thumbnails. Say, which one do you like? Narrow it down to 2. They'll pick the 2, and I'll say, okay, I'll come up with a digital rough in a week. You tell me if you like one of those. I'll give them 2 digital roughs, spend about 10 minutes on each one, just kind of flesh out the idea a little bit more. They'll pick one or they'll merge elements together. So now I have a good idea of what they have in their mind. I'll take that, I'll come back into it, and I'll render more into it. But I'm constantly emailing, not annoyingly, but just, I don't want to go further with this if this is not the direction you think, because I don't want to waste any time. And I certainly don't want to have to redo stuff. So got feedback here and there, things that he likes, things that he doesn't. So the illustration is essentially done. We're going to change the font. And I do need to create a vector out of this, but I'm just going to live trace it in Illustrator, so that won't take long. And then I'll bring it back into Photoshop and I'll paint underneath it. So what I want to take a look at right now is there any white in here? And there is. So this is going to be a problem. Problem here is I want to paint really underneath the line art. And if there's white, you can see those white here. I'll change this background color. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I can't paint underneath that and expect it to show up. I mean, if I paint underneath the shoes, I guess those will show up. And if I paint back here, that will show up. But all this stuff has white in it. So I got a problem. Well, I do have a solution. There's two solutions. One, and this isn't the best solution, but you could just take this folder and you could turn it to multiply. And then you could paint underneath that. In a pinch, that would work. So I could make a new folder. And I would call this flats. These are going to be my flat colors. And if you're going to choose to do this, you're going to have three folders. You're going to have flats. That's your base color. You're going to have shadows. And then you're going to have highlights. In fact, maybe I'll do it this way. And then I'll do it a different way next time. All right. Do not paint on white. Do not paint on bright red. Give yourself a neutral color. I'll do this kind of like real desaturated maroon. That way my colors will definitely show up. All right, here's how you paint flats. Regardless of the technique that you choose, the other technique that I'm going to show you is we're going to take this line art. We're going to use channels to isolate just the black. And then we're going to, based off of the channel selection, fill it with a shape layer. And that will be a solid color. Boom, we can paint right underneath it. In fact, let's just do it. It'll only take a minute. All right, so you could turn it to multiply. You absolutely could. I don't think it's the best idea, so I'm going to go back to normal. All right, let's turn this back to white. Now, because this is being recorded, I'll just go through it. It might not make much sense, but you can always go back to the recording. And I've got a demo on YouTube about how to isolate line work for comic art. So here's what you do. This is all good-ish. You're going to go to channels. I don't want to get into a channels discussion. It's a little bit more advanced, but understand that this separates your color channels. If you're working in an RGB document, here's your red, green, and blue. If it's CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and so forth. It doesn't matter because this is black and white, so it's irrelevant. But what you can do is just based off of the luminosity, the whites and the blacks, is you can click this little circle that kind of looks like a selection, little bunch of little dots. Click that, and now you have a selection. Cool. Let's jump back to layers now. Now, on top of this folder, I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color. Doesn't matter what I call it. Okay. Choose OK. And now I'm going to turn version 3 off. Now you might look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's kind of weird. Not what I expected. Me neither. But really what's happened is that solid color, that adjustment layer, has a mask on it. And that mask was generated by the channel selection. So the channels have done all the work for us. Instead of me going through there with a magic wand tool and grabbing black and grabbing black and grabbing black, it grabbed all the black. Made a little nice selection, real nice selection, as a matter of fact. Look how tight that selection is. It even got that little zip tone here at the bottom. Like, there's no way I could have ever selected that. So channels can do that. All right, so it got all that stuff. Problem is it's backwards. So just select the mask, Control I, boom. Now the beauty of this is maybe I actually like that hot pink. You know, maybe that's the color they're looking for. Cool. Well, maybe they're looking more for double click, black, or blue, or green, or whatever. I'm going to stay with black, but you get the idea that that adjustment layer can be whatever color you want. Let's go back to the flats now. All right, in the flat folder, I'm going to make a new adjustment layer, and this is also going to be a solid color. I think I had told him that the rat was going to be brown, but it doesn't matter. It's an adjustment layer. I can change it. If he wants gray, blue, doesn't matter. I'll start with brown. Brown is in the orange family. something like this. Now, when it comes to flat painting, don't choose something bright, light, or dark. Stay right around here in the middle, kind of desaturated. So this is my flat, and I will call this fur. The mask needs to be inverted because I want to paint the brown in. So with the mask selected, Control I, zoom in, B for brush, F5. Actually, I think I want my tool presets. So window, tool presets. I'll get that little inker that I had before. And now I'm just going to paint with white and paint those flats back in. So the black is sitting on top. Brown is underneath it. And I'm using my left hand to toggle the bracket keys to make my brush bigger and smaller. Once I'm done with my browns, maybe I'll move on to these shorts, which I have no idea what color I want to make those right now, but keep going with this. I think what I'll move on to next is underneath the fur layer, I will do the rat trap layer. And that will also be in the brown family, but it will be more of a yellow brown. Get the drift? All right, make a new layer. New adjustment layer, solid color, to kind of a yellowy brown. Okay, flip the mask, Control I, paint here. I can get kind of a big brush here. Now I'm not too worried about painting on top of or through the shoes because the shoes will be on top. So I can get kind of messy right now. This layer will probably be all the way at the bottom. I don't see anything else that would mess with that. All right, so you get the kind of the drift there. There's going to be a flat for every single color in this composition, and they're all going to go in the flats folder. Now, when it comes to shadows and highlights, that's going to have a folder too. One for shadows, one for highlights. Let me do a little bit of the face. I think that will look best with the shadows and highlights. All right, so face, boom. I kind of got the idea of what he wanted with this, and it's kind of it's a little bit funny, but I don't know, CrossFit is kind of a funny breed in the sense that they're pretty serious about what they do, and they want a certain level of intensity. So let's do the shadows. This is also going to be an adjustment layer. Now, what you could do is you could actually duplicate the fur layer, not the end of the world, or you could create a brand new layer. It's up to you. I'll make a brand new layer. Solid color. Okay. I'll get a brown. Control I. All right, so now on this layer, because the shadows are sitting above flats, I can come in here and start to paint in where I think the shadow shapes are. Shadows underneath the eyes, some shadows over here, shadows. Maybe I'll follow the black line around a bit, that striation in the chest. All right, so this is working pretty well, but where I think it really gets good is one of two things. This is what's called cell shading, where it's hard lines. It's like animation. If you're going for more of a modeled look, like you're trying to make it look more realistic, don't use a flat brush like this. Instead, F5 brushes, legacy. Let's get a nice soft edge brush. And this time, go at a low opacity. Go at maybe like 40% opacity. Take a look at how those kind of blend together. I'll change the color so you can see it a bit better. See the difference? Take a look at the abs where they have, it's like either on or it's off. It's hard edge. I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. It's just that's the way that it looks. As opposed to right here where it's got kind of a really nice soft gradation. If you're going for more of a modeled look, using a soft edge brush at a low opacity can really create some nice transitions in your artwork. Now, the last thing I'm going to do, obviously, I don't want my shadows to be bright, is I could change this entire layer's blend mode to say multiply to kind of create those shadow effects. Highlights would work the exact same, just opposite. They're lighter, and you would change the blend mode to say screen. But I don't want to get too far into this because I still need to make a vector out of it. So I got a lot of cleaning up to do. If you want to know why I've got to make a vector out of it, because one, it needs to be scalable, and two, take a look. Just like my brushes that I created, look at all that junk that got picked up from the scan. Like I could see data from the paper right here. I don't want that. When I live trace it, that stuff is gone. So I still need to do that. After I live trace it, I'll bring it back into Photoshop, tool it up a little bit more. I charge him 20 bucks on a better font. I can't stand this font, so I need to throw that in there, and then I'll start to paint it. Should be done with it this week. Okay, folks. We've been at it for 2 hours. I think I'm going to stop recording now.